If you focus on no other metric, focus on cost of quality and cost of poor quality. Your quality team is bloated when you have a lot of people on the team, but nothing seems to get done.
Welcome to the Better Batch podcast, where batch process manufacturers learn from industry experts. I'm Peter Suttard.
And I'm Alex Kovis. We're joined today by Nate Call, CEO of Qualitas. Nate and Qualitas work with both brands and manufacturers from a quality perspective. We're so glad to have you with us, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Nate, tell us a little bit about why companies bring you in.
Yeah, good question. We work with brands and manufacturers in dietary supplements, food, beverage, beauty. We always make a joke that, we're the lotions and potions quality company. And we are typically brought in for kind of two general reasons. One is a gap assessment or kind of a pulse check of the quality system, whether that's on the brand side or the manufacturer side. Wildly different approaches in terms of how we assess those businesses. Or we are brought in for less exciting reasons, or more exciting, depending on your perspective, where there was an issue and the brand or manufacturer can't find their way to the solution. And we're brought in to help with an investigation. Maybe we go on site, do something like that. But really anything under the sun, quality and compliance related, we build a business to do.
Sure.
And I'm kind of curious. It seems like a really different perspective where the brand is kind of asking you to go and take a look at the manufacturer versus where the manufacturer is kind of volunteering for this and wanting to improve their quality systems themselves. Do you see like a different kind of manufacturing facility in those two situations, or are most of these manufacturers kind of getting both services, both the brand and self-care?
It depends. We are engaged typically by a brand to do things like supplier qualification, auditing, where they have an existing legacy network of suppliers. We go in, do a 1 to 3 day, basically GMP assessment, audit of the facility, identified red flags, strengths, weaknesses, things like that. And in that scenario, we see facilities of all shapes, sizes, levels of maturity. And when we're engaged by manufacturers, we see a lot of smaller kind of startup manufacturing companies who understand that there's a lot they don't know. And in order for them to get to the next level, they have to establish very strong quality management systems. Otherwise, they won't be able to lock in new clients and grow their business.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that other case where they're doing it for a specific target, we often see, a client come in and they'll bring us in, as I'm sure they probably do you as well, where they say, okay, we're working on a deal with Costco and they want to do an audit. And like, now we need to get things ready. It's like, guys, like, you need to go back in time a few months, please, because that's going to be a big rush. Do you see that a lot where people have not left enough time to get it done?
All the time. We break hearts every day in conversations like that, right? Where it's Costco or it's NSF or it's, one of those larger companies who wants to come in and assess the facility. I get a lot of meeting requests from people who are 60 days out from those audits. Mm-hmm. And say, okay, what can we do to sprint through creating a quality system that will satisfy this requirement from NSF, especially? I think NSF's a good example. And, in those types of audits, they want to see 3 to 6 months of historical data. So just by that requirement alone, you're already too late to the game, where you call us 60 days out, it'll take probably a week or so to figure out travel when we can go on site, plus a few days of report time. Call it, 2 weeks, as fast as we can possibly go. And now you are 6 weeks away from this audit, right? And so it is a timing game.
Help me figure out then how far ahead we should be booking something like this, right? So they want to see 3 to 6 months of historical data. So let's maybe 4, and we talk to the auditor. 2 weeks even just to organize and get you started. The part which feels like the actual work of sprinting through and developing a quality program. How long does it take to develop that, do the work for a quality program?
It's a good question and really depends on the complexity of the manufacturing processes that we're looking at. We've built systems, as fast as 60 days, 2 months. We have also taken 18 months to to build systems, because if you're an active manufacturer, which all of our clients are, we have very few that are pre-revenue in the startup phase. It's like trying to repair a moving train while it is moving. And it is so difficult to, especially for the smaller manufacturers, just to have the resources in place to support the project to where we can do it quickly, where I can drop in, like the special forces team of Qualitas people. I can send 5 people to the site. We can fly through it. But if you don't have the resources and bandwidth on your side, the manufacturer side, what we're doing is in vain. And it really has to be steered by how fast the manufacturer can really move versus how our team can move, because we are almost always faster than the client can be.
It sounds like then for a well-motivated manufacturer, 9 months, if we were to start today, pick up the phone and phone you today, 9 months feels like a realistic time frame to get everything organized, get the work done, and start building up that backlog of data to impress the auditor.
Right. Totally.
Cool.
And I think another important distinction there is, we can build a system with someone in 2 months, like I said, but it takes another 2 months of fine-tuning and adjusting and making sure everything is working how it's supposed to. So I think 9 months is a healthy amount of time to give the site reasonable opportunity to succeed.
Sounds good. If it's good enough for a baby, it's got to be good enough for a quality program.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then the other end of the spectrum, imagine a facility where they've put a lot of energy into building their own quality systems and they feel pretty good about their in-house work, but they're scaling and taking on new business, and they want like an outside perspective to come in and fine tune that. Like what would be an amount of time needed more in that context where they've got good confidence, but they also know they want an outside professional?
It's a good question. And we have kind of a few different paths we can take. The first path is, you pick up the phone, call us. I have someone on a plane in 48 hours. We go to the site. We're there for 3 days, get you a report 2 or 3 business days later. And that report includes the executed GMP checklist or whatever standard we're using. Could be ISO, could be SQF, some GFSI scheme. And we give you a 90-day action plan. And if you execute the action plan in those 90 days, from our perspective, you should be able to achieve whatever goals you have. And we try to tailor the action plan against the business objectives, not always what we would consider to be the most absolute important thing they need to focus on. If they have a very specific target, we'll build our plan to align with that target. And of course, call out anything that is a safety issue. We are very comfortable moving quickly, aligning with the business and making sure they have what they need to succeed. The other option is, we take a little bit longer. We send out a data request list. We go through this process where by the time we walk into the facility, I've looked at the facility map. I've looked at your org chart. We've read all of your SOPs. We've already looked at the documentation. So we really hit the ground running and can move even faster in that scenario. And typically with brands who choose that path, we are often engaged to execute the 90-day action plan with their team. And that becomes a very interesting scenario for all of us, where it's less of a, here's a plan for you to follow. It's we are tactically executing with you, and we are going to hold you accountable every step of the way.
And you're just embedded with them for that whole process at that point.
Yeah, we are temporarily inside their org chart.
And that must move things a ton faster, having you guys there the whole time.
Absolutely. And we don't have to be on site a lot to do this. Let's do the 3 days. Maybe every month we'll pop in for another 2 or 3 days, or even less time than that. As long as we get the information we need, we don't need to live on site with you.
Very cool.
We have enough reps to where we get it.
You'd mentioned before one of the reasons people are calling you in is they've had failed batches. You've probably seen this a ton. What are the real common reasons for batches to fail?
Dangerous question, and I think the easy answer is it depends. But the real answer is it's a failure to follow the written procedures or documentation that support the creation of a compliant batch or a compliant production lot. And that is, we use the wrong formula in the batching or compounding instructions, or we put the wrong amount of the wrong material in the wrong place, or the temperature was incorrect. Something documentation related where the on-floor production or batching compounding team followed the instructions, but the instructions were just wrong. That happens all the time. And I'm sure you guys have seen that a lot too.
So many of our listeners are breaking out in a cold sweat right now. Like, not again. Yeah. Don't talk about it.
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, this is, obviously a favorite of ours from a Markov perspective, because, electronically enforcing that we got the right formula because we created the order for this product. That's our bread and butter. But that side of the instructions were there wrong in the first place. I mean, that's a fascinating one as well.
It's something that's hard to address too without electronic controls, especially from the formulation perspective, where we often see manufacturers just keeping track of their formulas in a Google sheet and just updating that revision number. But does the communication of that change get passed throughout the entire chain of the business? Does the batching team know that this formula was updated? I need to pay extra close attention. Or does the sales team know? Does anyone know that this changed?
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, it's something we see sometimes, at larger facilities where they'll have two or even more than two different versions of the process, depending on the size of batch and therefore the equipment they're going to use. And then the smaller manufacturer will have just one, and they won't necessarily dawn on them that they need a second one where they're going to, replace a piece of equipment for a better piece of equipment. They just leave the procedure, right? But it doesn't work anymore, right? Yeah.
Do you find these kind of errors happen more often, or I guess sooner in size with co-manufacturers? That's something we've seen, where the spread of revisions and the spread of recipes are so much bigger that they run into this, at a sooner revenue level.
I think it is a pervasive issue throughout all revenue tiers of manufacturers. I think for smaller manufacturers, I would say it happens more often, but the impact isn't quite as severe because your batch sizes are smaller, you have smaller production lots. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a human error game. Systems can fail, processes can fail, people are fallible and will fail from time to time. But if I'm a $5 million contract manufacturer, I'm probably running, 3 to 10,000 unit production runs, doing, that kind of volume. If I'm a $150 million manufacturer, I could be cranking out 150,000 bottles a day with my eyes closed. And so the issues are orders of magnitude larger at the larger contract manufacturers. And, I've seen destruction authorizations come across my inbox where we're the fractional head of quality. And, I could see a rejected batch value that cannot be reworked. That's, $250,000 or $175 or $350. And it's just, it passed that irreversible stage in the manufacturing process. And it is what it is. You can't rework it. You can't sell it. It's a loss and it sucks, but it's a great opportunity to really dig into your systems, dig into your processes, and understand how this happened. Doing the root cause analysis has to happen in those scenarios.
We've talked about, and the three of us have talked about this elsewhere too, how you have an ERP can help enforce, a manufacturing execution system can help enforce following the procedures. Companies that don't have that but are still succeeding, preventing these kind of errors, what are they doing?
They have great double and triple verification processes. I think that is the absolute cleanest way to make sure that, if you don't have the luxury of using a system like Markov or something else, or you don't have an electronic quality management system, let's at least build a stage-gated process where we have approvals that have to happen at certain stages, and we internally audit that process constantly. That is the best way to stay on top of change management at the end of the day as well. And, in our call earlier, Peter, we talked about how I've seen $100 million plus manufacturers and brands even operate inside of Google Sheets or SharePoint. And they do it well because they have the right stage gates in their processes. And it's not too complex.
It sounds like it's solved by labor then, right? It's like, okay, we have
absolutely.
Nate and Peter and Alex all working together on this. Yeah, it's expensive, but good.
Yeah, and if I'm understanding this right, Nate, it's, okay, we want to control this by having a double check we're using the right formula. And then confirm we're using the right weight with a second signature, and then also find some kind of analytical testing way to confirm that, like, yes, it looks right from a pH and viscosity perspective.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And then the organoleptic one is there as well, right? So you're layering on all of those extra checks to cover the fact that, like, any one of those checks might not be executed right. Am I right? That the added redundancy is what solves it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it also, the success of those processes really boils down to having a strong technical team who can do a risk assessment that is meaningful, not a very simple, basic run-of-the-mill risk assessment, but really dig into the process and let's do a failure mode and effects analysis. Let's see where the holes in our processes truly are, call those out, and let's have 2 to 3 mitigation strategies in place. Let's have 3 fail safes here where even if this verification step fails, I still have 2 more right behind it that will catch those fails. And that can be a blend of physical observation and the double verification signatures. It could be an in-process control test like pH, viscosity, solubility, something like that. There are a lot of simple things you can do. And it's labor, it's cost, but the alternative is worse.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's like a culture piece on the floor there that takes some time, but it's so important to put in, where we see it even when rolling out an electronic system. A batching operator scans, the first drum, and it says you can't use it for reason XYZ. I got one of these errors. Don't read the error. Scan the next one. Now I can pour the first one. Like, oh my God! Like, we lovingly showed you this error message that says you can't do that, and you just perceive that as a hurdle to step over, right? And anyways, not to shock people, but like, even with a system, you've got to overcome that cultural piece of like, this matters. It matters to read the message and understand it and execute. And so, yeah.
We should make that font bigger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Zap
loud.
with an
Play a
electrode
sound.
somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think those types of issues are very common and always boil down to a culture of quality issue and the war of minds between operations and quality, where I think in your example, Alex, the batching operator, they want to make the batch so they can hit their KPIs. They can do what they were expected to do that day, maybe not understanding the effect that has throughout the process, right? Where me scanning
they're messing up inventory.
$100,000.
Yeah, like it's they're messing up quality. They're messing it up for the warehouse in terms of the accuracy of the inventory. I mean, it's terrible. So yeah, to your point, like, it's getting them to understand the damage they're doing, right? It's like, yeah, it's not just about speed anymore, guys. It's like, this is important, and management sitting down with them. So
how do you manage that, the battle between, because obviously they're all working for the same company, helping operations and quality kind of bridge that gap between departments to make sure everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction? I
think a lot of it boils down to alignment, where we often see very siloed quality teams who kind of have their blinders on and they're only looking at GMPs. They're only thinking about, FDA requirements or Health Canada requirements, wherever they are. They can't pull themselves out of that silo enough to understand what the big picture is. And the big picture is we need to profitably manufacture products that are not going to harm someone. And as long as you can align on those North Stars, and of course there are margin attribution requirements and everything like that, but you have to align on the mission, vision, and values of the business. And that starts at the top. That is a CEO down issue. If your CEO cannot communicate what their expectations are, other than, I want EBITDA improvements, I want to improve shareholder, blah, 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 that is meaningless to the quality team. It's tactically, how are we going to do that? And how can the quality team be an ally for operations who is actually the group executing and doing these things? We should be an enablement tool, not a hindrance to the ops team. We should find every possible way to make their life better every single day. Not, how can I ruin the ops manager's day today because we got in an argument about this in-process adjustment I had to make or a deviation I had to do? Doesn't work.
I feel like by its nature, the quality team, like, their job involves oftentimes friction with other departments. You mentioned ops. Like, I think there's also friction there with sales and marketing. Where do you see like the biggest points of friction come between quality as an outsider coming in or the internal teams? How do you overcome that? From the perspective of someone who might be listening to this, who is a quality leader at a production facility and wants to helpfully make these changes and they're running into resistance? What can they do?
I think the issue there is, historically and institutionally in a lot of established businesses, quality is viewed as a roadblock, not a valuable team. Their job is to pass audits and make sure we keep our certifications active so we can continue doing what we need to do. But I think, again, it really does boil down to how can we be helpful to other people? How can we be good quality people as far as ensuring we're delivering a safe product? It's not going to harm anyone. It matches the label. We've done the right testing, and we can prove that all of those things have happened. If we've accomplished that, almost any other process you have inside the quality system, maybe it doesn't need to be there. Maybe you are creating work for yourself because your team is bloated, which is another issue we always see. Maybe not always, but we often see at manufacturers and even brands who have what we would really consider a broken process and a broken system. They fill and kind of plug those holes with people, and the people make it worse 9 times out of 10.
It's a good place to explore. You guys come in as fractional quality experts, right? A company will bring you in and get you guys to take a look at their system. And I feel like a lot of the times it's solved by extra people and it becomes bloated. Just like you said, help us understand a little bit more. How can a company know their quality team is bloated? Maybe let's start there. If I run a factory, how do I know I've got too many people on my quality team?
It's a good question. And, there are numbers that have been thrown around for forever since I started in the industry 15 years ago, where someone at some point said your quality unit should be 8 to 12% of your total enterprise headcount. And that number, from my perspective and understanding, is based in no science and nothing real, right?
Sure.
I think it's great. If you have 100 people, let's have 8 to 12 who are, quality, whatever. But the biggest red flag that I commonly talk about is your quality team is bloated when you have a lot of people on the team, but nothing seems to get done. That is the number one way to know your team is bloated. And the team is bloated because your processes suck. And you need to go through a process rationalization exercise to make sure that everything inside the quality system and everything they touch makes sense. And it should be there and it should be done. And we need these people to do these things. And oftentimes that's not the case. We find a lot of non-value added processes and tasks and these side quests and rabbit holes people are falling down. And I'll tell this to any executive who will listen: quality people and any person in a business will create work for themselves if they don't feel like they have enough to justify their presence in the business. So if you hire me and you say, okay, Nate, I want you to be the quality manager, but you have a VP of quality, a director of quality, 2 quality supervisors, all of these other people, you already have too many layers in that organization. So my role is now to manage red tape and to make sure that I put the red tape in the right places so I can be of value in terms of getting that red tape removed so a process can proceed. We need as few people as possible to do exactly what we need to do, which is delivering a safe, high quality, truthful product to the consumer.
So this is really interesting in talking about that bloat. In every department we work with, bringing in systems which are really there, to help make people's lives easier and more efficient. People often think like, okay, well, if I no longer have to spend half of my time just keeping paper records and organizing them, like, what am I going to do? And that can give a feeling of fear. And like you said, a feeling of need to justify. And we always say, hey, now that your time is freed up, you can do level 2 tasks instead of these level 1 tasks. From your perspective, for the quality department, what are the level 2 tasks? It would, like, if a quality person has their time freed up and they're no longer doing these basic tasks, what can they do to show value within an organization that's actually productive?
I think if we can eliminate and automate a lot of those kind of menial tasks where I'm dragging this PDF and putting it in this folder, those types of things, the time you gain from doing that should really be spent becoming an industrial quality person. And I think in CPG especially, I often see a lot of homegrown quality people who, started on the production floor. They were a quality inspector. They had, the eye, so to speak. They could spot something from a mile away and fix it. And that person ascends into a supervisor, gets maybe a little bit of training, probably not. Their boss leaves and boom, they're the quality manager now, and they don't really understand what they're doing. They're out of their depth. They've never had any root cause analysis training, continuous improvement training, anything like that. And it's difficult to know how to make an impact for those people. And that's often where we see a lot of bloat come from is, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to hire more people. But the tasks that they should actually be doing are failure mode and effects analysis, root cause analyses, continuous improvement initiatives, internal audits, making sure the systems that you have are actually functional versus pushing paper around or saying, oh, I'm just prepping for an audit. You should never have to really prep for an audit if you have a good quality system in the first place. You may stage some documents, but you should never have to drop everything and prep for 2 weeks and clean everything up right out of the gate.
I love that because, like, as you were just alluding to, like if I as a quality leader can look across the products I make and say, like, look, our average, like, you know, batch gets reworked 2.5 times, and like, what's the worst offender? And like, I can cut this down, and now 75% of the time it's like first pass approved. And we can run the math and do the ROI on that and see, like, that I just saved all this money, because that feels like such a, like, just incredible thing to deliver. And I'm no longer saying, like, oh yeah, I'm rejecting this batch. I'm saying, like, look at all these batches that are no longer being rejected because of these improvements we've made. And like, it's just so exciting to me to think of that perspective. Yeah.
No, that's a great call out. And I think if I were recommending to kind of a greener quality person, kind of that person who became the supervisor, their boss left, now they're the quality manager. If you focus on no other metric, focus on cost of quality and cost of poor quality. Those are some of the most impactful metrics for the business and are a very good signal of health for the quality system, where if you have reworks, if you have to cut a manufacturing run short because you ran out of labels, or you have bright stock and all of these other random things, there are so many opportunities to improve the manufacturing process that, from my perspective, kind of pay off the quality team, where we're often considered a cost center. And I know, Alex, you and I have actually talked about this a lot, where I think a good quality team should be a value creation center, where we are creating a ton of value. We are tightening processes, which can absolutely be uncomfortable for operations, where we say, no, your tolerance that was this big is now this big. And if we can get it right here, this is the financial impact it will have on the business. You've been complaining about this machine that sucks for 2 years. Great. Here's an opportunity to tighten that tolerance, recover some of those lost dollars, pay for your equipment. You can find so many pennies inside of a manufacturing facility, and $100 bills too, that are just laying around because no one has paid attention to them. There's a lot of opportunity.
I think it would be super valuable for our audience to just hear you unpack for a minute what cost of quality as a metric is all about. If you could just explain a little bit about how I would get to that number, how I'd use that number, that'd be super valuable.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about cost of poor quality first is costs associated with things that have gone wrong. So that could be a rework, that could be a retest, any type of rejection. You have to touch something twice, anything that goes through the process that does not, win that first pass release badge, so to speak. That is your cost of poor quality. All of the negative outcomes of the quality system that's failing. Cost of quality is really your overhead, largely, right? The quality team itself is part of cost of quality. It's appraisal costs is what they call it, where that's your testing, that's your inspection, other things like this. What are the preventative measures that the quality team has in place, and what are the costs associated there? Those could be things like environmental monitoring, consulting firm fee, anything like that. That is cost of quality, but also, internal and external failure modes need to be included here as well. What are external factors that should arguably be placed inside that cost of quality, cost of poor quality bucket, and internal factors as well, right? Where you have turnover inside your team, or you have this documentation issue, or this equipment went down because the maintenance process failed. To me, that should be a cost of poor quality, right? And I know that's not really a direct answer to the question, but kind of very high level, whatever the quality team does has a cost associated with it. We're not earning the business any dollars in most cases. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and a lot of newer quality managers are kind of afraid about tracking cost of quality and poor quality because it's a financial metric and they're not finance people. So they don't understand how to do this, and they don't understand as a percentage what the cost of quality should be in a healthy business. And that number has an asterisk next to it for sure, but if you have a very tight ship, your cost of quality is 1% to 3%. If you don't have a tight ship, it's higher than that, or you have additional controls because you're a high quality, premium, luxury business and your cost of quality is 3% to 6%. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but we can't pretend that those are not numbers we should be measuring and thinking about.
Absolutely.
No, I love it. And so tracking along to be sure I understand, it sounds like something like customer complaints, right? We should try to figure out, what is the cost of a customer complaint, right? Does this mean they're no longer a customer? What does that cost us? What is like the support desk, what's the burden upon them to work through it? And okay, now, if we can cut those complaints down, here's how much money we save. Am I thinking about this the right way in terms of the cost of poor quality? Yeah. Okay.
For sure. And I think complaints are a good example as well, where, I mentioned side quests, wild goose chases. Complaints can be a side quest in a wild goose chase where, a certain complaint may make its way to the CEO who panics and thinks, oh, shoot, I have this major issue, massive fire drill for everyone. I have 20 people attacking this issue. Skipping to the end of the complaint investigation, you spent $20,000, $30,000 on labor because one person said, the color of their capsule was off and it was tan instead of beige or something like that, something stupid or an interesting one. And we see a lot of issues in how brands especially manage complaints where you have the customer service team could be hundreds of people, right? The escalation process for complaints is almost always broken on the brand side if they don't have a quality team. We're not doing the investigations we need to be doing. And the investigations we are doing don't result in any real value to the business, and they don't really protect the consumer. We're not paying attention to the right things, the right trigger words.
How do you decide then? I mean, if I'm a CEO and I see a complaint come in, I want to take that seriously. How do I, as that CEO, decide this is a complaint worth investigating or we should give up on this particular one? How can you make that decision before you spend $30,000 on labor investigating? To
me, it's kind of a two-part answer. The first part is anything that is safety related, I am dropping everything and I will spend my entire day, my entire week, my entire month trying to figure out what happened. If someone said, I took this product and 2 hours later I was getting emergency gastrointestinal surgery or something like that, that's a real complaint that I investigated 2 months ago. Those things happen. Those are complaints where let's do the fire drill. Let's make that happen. But it's a data game where one complaint may be statistically insignificant. And when you're selling tens of millions or hundreds of millions of units every year, I'm not going to drop everything to investigate one complaint that is 0.000006% of total units sold. I'll make a note of it in our complaints log and we'll track that. We'll trend it and see, okay, maybe we actually do have an uptick here. That's a signal something went wrong in the manufacturing process. That's an opportunity for us to improve. But we have to understand what we call a characteristic complaint is for a specific product. If you have a gut health product, you're going to get gut-related complaints where this made my stomach hurt. I had diarrhea, or in a more serious way, I threw up and I became so dehydrated that I went to the emergency room and I had to get an IV. You may have people that react so poorly to certain products that it's really an issue. I don't want to say an issue on the consumer side, but there are hypersensitive consumers to some of the strongest dose dietary supplements, especially, where they're always going to have issues. They could try 1,000 different brands of the same product and just annihilate their gut all day long. And I think the same is true with beauty as well, where if you have sensitive skin, you have sensitive skin and things will affect it, right? I have sensitive skin. I see a little red spot right here. It is what it is. Stuff like that happens. And it's a trending game. It really is. We have to pay attention to the complaints, trend them, classify everything. And if we do determine based on data there's an issue, we're investigating, we're taking action, but we are not always going to investigate every single complaint that hits our inbox. We'll review them,
Gotcha.
but maybe not investigate.
It's interesting. I feel like complaints are a good place to ask you about communications between brands and contract manufacturers that work for them, right? Because complaints go to the brand, right? And then, so what would be for you best practice around a brand and a contract manufacturer to collaborate around complaints and how they get escalated back to the production team's quality department and that back and forth communication?
It's a good question, and I think it largely depends on the relationship between the brand and its contract manufacturer. For example, I once worked for a brand who, multi-billion-dollar company, thousands of complaints a month. Thousands and thousands of complaints across 100 plus countries, and it seemed very chaotic. And originally what we did is every week at, Friday at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time, you're going to get an auto-generated report of every single complaint we got, including the lot number, the nature and description of the complaint, and I want you to investigate everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of pushback and rage we experienced from our contract manufacturing partners in doing that was insane, and really taught me that contract manufacturers should not be investigating one-off complaints if there's not a consumer safety issue. Similar story, let's make a note, let's trend, let's pay attention to it, but we're not going to give ourselves a fire drill because someone had 121 tablets instead of 120 tablets inside this container. That is not worth our time investigating. That's within our allowable tolerance, right? And I think the escalation and communication pathway, that needs to be established within your quality agreement in terms of, what criteria have to be met in order for the contract manufacturer to investigate. Because when I ran contract manufacturing sites, I'd have brands complain periodically about things, and I would review the complaint, maybe pull a quick batch record and historical complaint data and say, okay, we don't actually have an issue here. The retains look good. Batch record looks good. I think we're in good shape. Thanks for letting us know. We'll keep an eye on it. Pay attention to this. That is the best way, from my perspective.
Easy access to retains, easy access to batch records just make that so much smoother, right? To be able to respond quickly.
Absolutely.
What does it look like when a company hires you to come in and be the fractional quality group?
It depends on the level of maturity inside the organization, where if we walk into a brand, especially who has experienced CPG operators, they have a good marketing team, we have the right spiritual kind of guide rails in place already, where maybe they don't quite know what the wrong thing is, but they definitely know we can't say this. They have that type of experience. We typically just do a gap assessment of their institutional processes against what we would consider industry best practices and any regulatory requirements that they should be complying with. And based on that gap assessment, the outcome is really that action plan that I mentioned earlier, where if you fix these things over the next 90 days or spread that to 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever, you'll have a good quality system and you will satisfy all of the requirements that you need to satisfy. And that kind of becomes the fork in the road for us of, okay, we've assessed your systems and we've given you an action plan. Fork in the road is, can you tackle and do these things yourself, or do you need us to do it or want us to do it? Even if you can, maybe you don't want to and you just want to lean on a quality team like ours. And that's often where we find ourselves after brand gap assessments, less so on the manufacturing side, just because it is important to have as much on-site presence as possible to truly be an effective fractional quality team. For example, we're based in Salt Lake. I have a few Salt Lake-based manufacturers where I am their VP of quality. I'm popping in, once a week, every 2 weeks, a couple days a month, whatever the case may be, to make sure that I have control over the system and I am being fed everything I need to eat to understand what's happening inside the business. But I think a good way to think about the fractional relationship is this. We talk about bloated teams and bloated processes. You can have 12 amazing quality people in your org chart, and those 12 people could have a fully burdened annual cost of $1.5 million, $1.8 million, plus or minus a few $100,000. What those people can do, kind of looking at it through an 80-20 rule where 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work, we only hire that kind of 20% crowd, so to speak, where we are laser focused on what we're doing. We are not bogged down by operational noise. We're not going to these all hands meetings, singing kumbaya, making s'mores with people. We're getting the work done. That is all we are focused on, is getting the work done, holding ourselves accountable, holding the business accountable. And the same is especially true on the manufacturing side, where we are building a plan together, hell or high water, regardless of any headwinds or resistance we face. We were engaged by the executive team to do this, and we're going to do it. And if you want to kick and scream, but it's going to happen. This is what the business wants to have happen.
Yeah. So one question I had was, is there an issue, maybe one or two points that you guys discover so often when you get contracted by a manufacturer that you would say, okay, before you call me, go fix these two things and then come back, right? Is there anything that's that high in prevalence?
Absolutely. And I think our top 10 list is the exact same top 10 list the FDA has. The number one issue we always see is failure to follow your written procedures. Mm-hmm. And we see so often, regardless of manufacturer size and maturity, gaps in that area where the process you're doing in practice may actually be a lot better than what you have written down, but you're still going to get slapped around by us or by the FDA because your SOP says you're doing something different. That is the number one symptom of a broken system.
And what's the fix for that, I guess? Is it standing out there often enough to say you're not following, or is there, like, I'm just curious, like, what would be the go-to solution for that big problem?
I think the kind of gut reaction is internal audits and being on the floor. We see a lot of manufacturers who have their quality team offices inside kind of the corporate office section of the building. I want the entire quality team to be out on the floor or very close to the noisy floor, hearing all of the clinking and banging and dropping of things. I want them to be where the magic is happening, because the worst thing a quality leader can do, in my mind, is put on their suit and tie, walk into their office, spend 10 minutes a week on the production floor just yelling at people, saying, this sucks, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, because they're surprised that these things are happening. They can't figure out why. It's because they're disengaged. If you are engaged spend time. Be with the people. Talk to production.
Wear the right?
Yeah, wear that beard net for sure. And I always give people an example of, in a past life where I was the director of quality at a manufacturer here, we had an issue where we had a very tacky bulk product that we just could not clean off the inside of this tank. Mm-hmm. And we tried all of these different types of cleaning chemicals and solutions and different ways of doing things. And no one could figure out why we couldn't clean this tank effectively. Like it was taken out of commission because it could not be cleaned. Only to realize that no one had actually climbed inside the tank to clean it. They just stuck their arm down with a wand and were spraying stuff around, trying to scrub it with like a deck brush, stuff like that. And I get it. Going inside of a 1,000-gallon tank is scary. It's a confined space. There are OSHA implications there, and you need your buddy up top to make sure you don't fall down and die. There are all of those factors, but that's the kind of stuff that you won't ever figure out unless you go to the floor and observe what's really happening. Where, I had that issue for a few weeks, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to watch them do it and see what they're actually doing. And I climbed inside the tank, blasted it, cleaned it. We were good. And that became the new process, updated SOPs, work instructions forms. All was well after that. That is what quality leaders should be doing.
On the flip side of Alex's question, you go and do a gap analysis. Is there a common thing that you're giving them in terms of feedback that manufacturers don't want to hear? You're like, make sure you do this. You're like, oh, okay, do your homework. You're like, oh, I really don't want to do my homework. What are those things that they push back on, that kind of advice?
Training. It's almost always training, where we walk into a site and say, okay, based on our observations, there's clearly a knowledge or education gap here related to whatever standard we're trying to comply with, you need to get ISO 22716 training. You need to do it. We can do it for you.
Why
You can do
why
it
push
yourself.
back on that though? What's the, as a manufacturer, yeah, it's expensive.
It's almost always time driven, where they feel like they don't have the time to dedicate to that level of training and learning. And that's the vicious cycle of manufacturing in my mind. And quality really is, if you don't have the right systems in place, you're in a constant state of fire drills. The fire drills dominate your time. Everything is an emergency. You can never get anything done. And that will never change until you make time to fix those problems. And that starts with having a good foundation of knowledge. And if you don't have that, you are just wasting time in your business.
Yeah, Nate, we see the same thing trying to implement systems and software sometimes where it's like, this is going to give you a 20% efficiency boost. It's like, okay, great. This sounds good. Wait, what do you mean I have to shut down production while we learn how to use it? But it pays for itself after 1 week. Yeah, but we can't shut down production, right? It's like,
yeah,
well,
sure.
Sometimes you painted yourself into this corner, and to get out of it, you might have to do that briefly, right?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same story and same situation, I guess, that I run into pretty often, where what we do is not cheap. I mean, we're not as expensive as your $1.5 million quality team by any stretch of the imagination, but we're not $49 an hour kind of McDonald's special quality people. We are, from our perspective, the best of the best. And we lose deals sometimes purely based on cost. And every now and then I'll get a call from someone that said, hey, we connected 9 months ago. You gave us this proposal. Timing wasn't right. Let's reconnect. Let's re-engage. And in those conversations, they had a quality event that happened. A lot was rejected and had to be destroyed, or maybe something was held at customs for so long that it was too close to the expiration date that it had to be rerouted and come back or something like that.
Right.
All driven by the absence of the processes we were trying to convince this business to create and deploy. And that happens all the time, where our engagement, say it was $50,000, could have prevented this $150,000 issue you're now facing. Now you're just going to come back and have to pay us anyway, and probably more, because we have the same project initially we were trying to do with you, but then we have to triage the actual quality event that happened. So the cost just balloons exponentially.
Well, at least now we get to prevent the next quality cost, 9 months down the road.
Right. It's still worth it.
At some point we got to do
For
it.
sure. And I like to tell people too, we've been doing this a really, really long time. I've been to something like 800 or 900 manufacturers all over the world. We have a really good network of partners that we use. Understanding what we do is expensive. Let's find you some low-hanging fruit opportunities to save money. Let's consolidate your testing into a single lab where you now have better economies of scale in your own right, in addition to us, where you may now send $500,000 of testing to, lab 123. But when we introduce you to that laboratory, the lab knows that, while this may be $500K, there's also $10 million of other business that Qualitas is bringing to them. And so we can help you negotiate a lot of different ways to save cash. And I try to tell people, let's find a way to pay for this engagement before it's over. Let's save you some money.
This is probably a good place to almost wrap up, or a nice kind of conclusion. What kind of things can organizations do to save money on the quality side? Your example of negotiating bulk testing rates with a place, fantastic. What else is there?
I think the lab spend opportunity is almost always the first one that I call out, because it's the easiest. Largely. The other cost-saving opportunities are really driven by process rationalization, where if we can eliminate a process, an unnecessary process, we're eliminating labor, we're eliminating materials, we're eliminating resource needs from this business. Now we can put those resources in a different area that will make money for the business. And I think that it's not a direct answer to the question, but that is largely the approach we take, is let's trim the fat out of this process and out of the business and focus on what really matters. And once you can start doing that, like, earlier in the conversation, killing the level 1 tasks, going to level 2, that's what the intent of that exercise is for us is value-added tasks. If we are adding value, we are increasing EBITDA. We are making improvements for the business happen.
Amazing.
Love it.
I'm not out of questions, but I'm pretty sure we're out of time.
I was going to say, like, I have so many more. It's just been so informative, Nate.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure. Happy to chat quality anytime. And next time we can do an 8-hour podcast and just rally through it.
People will love it with extra long commutes. So where can people get a hold of you, Nate?
I am always on LinkedIn all day, every day, posting 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. But you can find us at myqualitymanager.com. My email address is nate@myqualitymanager.com. We have a team all over the US. You'll find us at trade shows, find us at events, find us at a manufacturer near you. We always have people out on the road, and it's not hard to bump into us if you're in the CPG space.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Nate. It's been great.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you guys.
Thanks for watching the Better Batch podcast. We're so happy you could join us. If you've got idea for show ideas or you just want to improve your manufacturing, reach out to us and we'd love to hear from you.